All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about negotiation, but probably not in the way you're used to. So for a minute, forget the tactics, forget the clever lines, and the back and forth haggling. We're going to go deeper into the invisible architecture of power, the thing that really decides who wins long before the first offer is ever even on the table. This is about the hidden game of status. Most of us are taught to believe that the person with the best data, the most logical argument, or the most well-reasoned spreadsheet is the one who's going to come out on top. And that, right there, is probably the single biggest misunderstanding in all of deal-making. Because the truth is, logic doesn't win negotiations. Hierarchy does. See, before anyone ever talks about terms or price or conditions, there's this unspoken contest for rank that's already happening. And the outcome of that contest, well, that determines everything that comes next. The deal just ends up following the hierarchy that's been perceived. So, in this explainer, we're going to dissect this hidden game. First, we'll look at the signal, what's really going on, then the pattern, where we see it show up, and then the game itself. After that, we'll get into the cost of not seeing it, the edge you get when you do, and we'll wrap it all up with 3 really critical questions for your next negotiation. Here's the thing. Every negotiation you're in is actually 2 negotiations happening at the same time. The first one is the one everybody sees, right? It's about the money, the terms, the outcomes. But underneath all of that, there's a second, far more important negotiation going on, the one for status. And that is the real negotiation. This right here is the core principle. That beautifully crafted financial model you spent all night on, it means very, very little if you've already been put into a low-status role. The negotiation over rank is what truly determines how value is going to flow. The deal, in the end, just confirms the hierarchy that's already been set. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. It is a fundamental pattern that shows up anywhere the stakes are high. From FBI crisis negotiations to corporate mergers, all the way to international treaties. The exact same physics of status are always at play. Okay, so the first signal is that status is what sets the terms. In FBI crisis negotiations, for instance, agents are trained to use silence as a tool. Why? Because the person who feels that uncomfortable need to fill the void, to explain themselves, to justify, they are signaling lower status. The high status player, on the other hand, is perfectly comfortable with that silence. They wait. They force the other side to reveal information and to start conceding ground. Power gets established long before a single demand is even met. So that leads to our second signal. Concessions always flow downward. Just picture a corporate boardroom for a second. The pressure in that room isn't applied equally to everyone, is it? No, it's directed at the people who are perceived to have a lower rank. You don't really negotiate with an equal. You negotiate based on your perceived spot in the hierarchy. Concessions are pulled from the person who is seen as having less authority. And the third signal is that framing controls rank. The words that are used to describe a situation are never neutral. They assign roles. Think about it. Are you a vendor asking for a contract? Or are you a strategic partner who's solving a critical problem? Are you an applicant looking for a job? Or are you top talent evaluating an opportunity? If you accept the other side's frame, you are accepting the lower status role they just assigned you before the real negotiation is even started. So all of these signals, they build into the game itself, and you can see it playing out in real time through tangible actions and language. These are the moves that show you very clearly who's leading and who's following. Just look at the comparison right here. On one side, you have the high status player. They tend to speak less and they ask more questions. On the other side, the low status player feels this compulsion to explain more, to answer every question. The high status player is fine with silence. The low status player rushes to fill it. Every single one of these behaviors is a move in the game, and it either asserts dominance or it signals submission. So what happens when you don't see this game being played? Well, you fall right into the low status trap. And it is a predictable, often devastating path that leads you to concede value without even realizing why you're doing it. Here's how it usually works. It starts off really subtly. First, you accept their frame, you become the vendor. Then what happens next is you naturally start justifying your price, your value, your position. This leads you right into step 3. You start making these little reasonable concessions just to show you're a good partner. And before you even know what's happened, you're at step 4. You've lost all control of the outcome because you already lost the status game way back at step 1. And this is the crucial point. Most deals don't fall apart because of a lack of skill or bad tactics. They fail because one side doesn't even know there's a deeper game happening. They're sitting there playing checkers while the other side is playing chess on a completely different board, the board of status. So this brings us to the edge. The advantage that elite operators have isn't some secret playbook of tricks. It's a fundamentally different way of seeing the entire interaction. They see the status game with absolute clarity, and that changes everything for them. So how do they think? Well, first off, they consciously negotiate status before they ever get to the terms. They reject frames that don't suit them, and they reframe the situation to their advantage. They use silence and time not as things that just happen, but as active tools to apply pressure. And they understand a core principle of power. Whoever is asking the questions is the one in control. So let's turn this lens on you. To start seeing this game in your own life, you don't need a bunch of new tactics. You just need new questions. So here are 3 things to ask yourself before and during your next high-stakes conversation. First one, who feels higher status here? And don't think about titles or who has the corner office. Pay attention to the feeling in the room. Who's more relaxed? Who's leaning back in their chair? And who is leaning forward? Power is felt way before it's ever seen on paper. Second question, how are you being perceived? Are your actions signaling confidence and authority, or are they signaling neediness and anxiety? Are you the one explaining, or are you the one inquiring? The signals you're sending out are what determine the status you're going to be given. And finally, maybe the most important question of them all, what role have you accepted? Are you the supplicant, asking for something? Or are you the expert, solving a problem? Because the role you accept at the very beginning will almost always define the outcome you get at the very end.